Vicky, you can begin. Okay, the recording's on. You can begin, and we're not hearing the speaker. Colleen, you're gonna have to
Sorry,
unmute.
sir. Sorry. My bad. My bad. Um, Good day, class. Today, our group will be presented on being in communities, and our group consists of Sayada Singh, Colleen Allen, and Janelle O'Connor. A little chapter overview. Envisioning each group or organization you are in as a community provides a mental model that will respond to the relational needs of these rapidly changing times. This chapter discusses the nature of communities, principles of community development, and your role as an active member of your community of practice. Our table of contents will go as the importance of communities, and we have elements of communities, a common center, communities of practice, development of community, and lastly, college communities. The importance of communities. Knowing about community, physical, believing in the worth of community, and being skilled at developing and sustaining community are essential aspects of relational leadership. Although there is no ideal perfect community in this reality, seeing that we all actively function in imperfect communities that are striving to be better will become supportive environments for the growth of each individual and the group. Any group that came together for the purpose of, for a purpose, for example, a neighborhood, an office, a class, a city experiencing a natural disaster, all continually participate in conversations about the questions who are we and what matters, as stated by Whitley and Kellner Rogers. Gardner asserts that skill in the building and rebuilding of community is not just another of the innumerable requirements of contemporary leadership. It is one of the highest and most essential skills a leader can command. Relational leadership. What is relational leadership? It is attending to community as a discipline. The term discipline in this case refers to what is being learned, studied, and practiced as one would learn academic disciplines like English, biology, or history. Here we have a little video explaining more about relational leadership.
Hello, welcome to this video module on relational leadership. Today, we'll explore the distinction between positional and relational views of leadership using Komovitz, Lucas, and McMahon's 1998 book on college student leadership. First, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Brett Tallman. I'm an engineer in Bozeman working in product development, small-scale manufacturing, and the biomedical field. For the past several years, I've been exploring engineering education, and I'm now finishing my doctorate in industrial engineering. I'm really interested in the topic of engineering leadership, and I'm excited to have you along as we explore a little bit of it together.
To start with, let's take a moment to think about what leadership even is. Let me ask you a question. What's the first thing that comes to mind when I say leadership? Some might think of a powerful politician, maybe an important historical figure, or a business success, or even a fictional character. Usually people think of someone in charge, and for a long time, this is how we've thought of leadership. One individual leading many to do something great. Sometimes we call this positional leadership, and it might be the model that has guided your school experience thus far. But as civilization and technology has progressed, the challenges facing society require more than one great person. Technical competence, creative insight, or brainstorming have led to great advances in the world we see around us. For example, technical solutions often require a diverse team of experts working interdependently with a combination of collaboration, autonomy, and trust. More than ever before, these challenges require groups that work together towards a common goal or a purpose. So we need to update our understanding of leadership to fit today's challenges. The relational approach proposes that we expand our understanding of leadership. In addition to something one person does, we can also envision leadership occurring in a way not based on position or authority. Rather, those with relevant skill, knowledge, or experience, they bear responsibility for the project when it's in their wheelhouse. This brings us to the relational approach to leadership. Leadership is defined as a relational and ethical process of people together attempting to accomplish positive change. In this process, members are engaged in working together towards a shared purpose. Maybe that purpose is clean drinking water in the developing world. Maybe it's a new orthopedic medical device, or developing a system that filters indoor recirculated air to eliminate viruses. What's the common theme in these? They're changes, hopefully positive, to the status quo. And they're accomplished by a team working with common purpose. The key component of this approach is working within the context of relationship. So members depend on each other, and each member bears responsibility for group success. For example, the water pump expert works with a site engineer. Because their fields are so entwined, neither can succeed without the expertise of the other. So what does this approach look like? The relational approach centers purpose at the heart of leadership. This means each member is committed to the group goal, such as a new product or innovation. An important aspect of this is empowerment. Rather than one authority surrounded by servants, this model of leadership suggests an interdependence between members. In other words, every member bears responsibility for project success, and they depend on each other. For example, to develop a new filtration system, one person may specialize in filters, one in airflow, and another in virus control. Each contributes in a special way. The third idea is ethics. If a group is to wield the power of change, the goal should be improving society, not exploiting it. And as an engineer, our professional mandate to protect the public welfare comes before our responsibility as employees. The third prong is inclusion. By integrating diverse perspectives in the pursuit of a goal, a broad, more balanced approach may be found by engaging many rather than few in the conversation. For example, we need not only to understand how airflow is important in the classrooms, but also in offices, restrooms, and common spaces. Finally, the idea that surrounds all this is process. What activities characterize the group? How are decisions reached? How are members included? How is purpose pursued? For example, is collaboration common? How about reflection? Is the community supportive? Is criticism civil? Is feedback transparent and fair? The context of process reminds us that leadership is not a static state, but a process. In sum, relational leadership proposes that contributing to a group's purpose is everyone's responsibility. Moreover, when all members are included and empowered to engage, the effectiveness of the group improves. Using this approach allows us to consider leadership with a focus on shared purpose in an ethical way that respects and values all involved.
Well, we've come to the end of today's brief introduction into relational leadership, and I hope this has given you some insight into more expansive ways of working with others towards a shared goal in meaningful, interdependent ways. Thank you for joining me today. Hello, welcome to this
relational leadership. It asks you to envision the context of as a team to a whole paradigm of expectations and norms for working together effectively as, as participants in, in shared leadership. It may not be enough to just understand self and to understand others. Understanding is essential to creating and nurturing the context in which the group or organization functions. Thinking of the relationships in that setting as a community focus, focuses participants' attention on the responsibilities, the processes, and the spirit of working together. Let's say, for example, can you think of the most effective or meaningful class or group you have been a part of? Did being a part of it make you feel like you matter or had a useful impact on others in the group? Or did you have an opposite experience? You can probably recall or imagine a group you had to be a part of which held little to no value for you, or in which you felt little in common with the others of the group, or little commitment to the task in that setting. Here we have a quote by Tasha Fields. I feel a part of a community within a family group at a church camp. Each group I have been a part of has been categorized by the formation of the group's covenant, a common purpose, trust, acceptance of people's emotional levels, willingness to share, a security to reveal emotions, thoughts, and opinions without criticism, strong role models within the surrounding group, and time for both fun and serious activities. Now we move on to elements of community. A community is most often described as a social group that not only shares an identity and structured pattern of interaction, but also a common geographical territory, as stated by Goodman. However, community is not just a place where interaction occurs, but also an attitude of connection and commitment that sustains relationships and purpose. Sharing that community commitment is the essence of relational leadership. Communities know they are a collection of individuals who accomplish their goals through trust and teamwork. Teamwork requires processes to make decisions, methods of communication, and a commitment to some level of participation by community members. Gardner extends that traditional definitions of community to refer to effective communities as those that practice the eight elements. The eight elements are wholeness, incorporating diversity, a shared culture, good internal communication, caring, trust, and teamwork, group maintenance and governance, participation and shared leadership tasks, development of young people or new members, and links with the outside world. Many traditional views of community are changing. Conventional views present communities as homogeneous groups of people who have much in common and may even resemble each other in ideology, race, or class. Those may indeed be communities, yet cultural and ethnic diversity and all other forms of diversity as well are necessary resources for building community. A true community cannot exist without diversity. If all communities members saw things the same way, had the same skills, and had the same life experiences, their ability to be resilient and face change would be limited. Community is that place where the person you least want to live with always lives. And when that person moves away, someone else arises to take his or her place, as stated by Palmer. Electronic networks have provided a creative way of communities of common interest to interact. Internet, chat rooms, blogs, message boards, online discussion groups, and sites such as MySpace.com are linking people across the globe into selective communities in which their minds meet. Cyber communities have provided support connections for gay and lesbian students and students with disabilities. Although many remain cautious of internet relationships, studies demonstrate that offline and online relationships do not differ in depth and may even be associated with social well-being, as stated by Boonbreak. Now, as human beings, we all want meaningful connections to others, patterns that are inclusive and empowering, in which there is purposeful change being accomplished through ethical and collaborative processes are the effort of effective communities. Relational leadership flourishes in settings that value the elements of community. Now I'll pass you over to Janelle.
Good evening, everyone. I am Janelle O'Connor, and I will be presenting on a common center. According to Martin Buber, our life together is some form of community, and it is what makes life worth living, in his classic I and Thou in 1958. He describes community as a group of people who have made a choice around a common center, such as people with a goal of solving social issues, or a sport community consisting of team players, coaches, family members, and fans. We also in this class are some sort of community. Even leadership educators struggle with the role of importance of community and shared leadership. A quote from the National Invitational Leadership Symposium is that binding together of diverse and individuals committed to a just, common good through shared experiences in a spirit of caring and social responsibility. Next slide, please. Openness is a central practice for a community, and with openness comes true dialogue, which requires listening and willingness to give up the need for control, even if your ideas and thoughts may differ from someone else's. Without the willingness to give up control, you can engage in a monologue that cannot promote community. Being in community requires the realization that one member's needs are not above another's. Communities speak to us in moral voices. They lay claims on their members. Indeed, they are the most important sustaining source of moral voices other than the inner self, according to Etzioni. Next slide, please. Take a moment to think of how authentic and genuine you are as a supporting member of the communities that matter to you. Okay, keep that in mind. The difference between our beliefs and actual behaviors becomes transparent in our communities. According to Hesselbein, Goldsmith, and Beckard and Schubert, communities are the mirrors in which we see ourselves. Next slide, please. According to Christopher Mowbray, who was a management cadet that worked in a corporation's finance division and also attends the University of Wollongong, John Donne said, "No man is an island unto himself." I believe these immortal words to mean that while we can and often must function individually to achieve personal goals and self-confidence, we must interact with our friends, our family, and our community. We're working with a community of people who can learn acceptance and equality. There's a necessary sharing of ideas and technologies. By working as a team and building on each other's ideas, plans, and ideas that are not just created, but are evolved into better, clearer plans. Enthusiasm and success are contagious. You can't spread it yourself. Next slide, please. I will now move on to communities of practice, and we have a video for you.
The term community of practice is of relatively recent coinage, even though the phenomenon it refers to is age-old. The concept has turned out to provide a useful perspective on knowing and learning. Communities of practice are formed by people who engage in a process of collective learning in a shared domain of human endeavor. Think of a tribe learning to survive, a band of artists seeking new forms of expression, a group of engineers working on similar problems, a clique of pupils defining their identity in the school, a network of surgeons exploring novel techniques, or a gathering of first-time managers helping each other cope. In a nutshell, communities of practice are groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. Not everything called a community is a community of practice. A neighborhood, for instance, is often called a community, but is usually not a community of practice. So what are the characteristics of a community of practice? 3 characteristics are crucial. Beverly will briefly explain.
Let me begin with the first characteristic, the domain. A community of practice is not merely a club of friends or a network of connections between people. It has an identity defined by a shared domain of interest. Membership, therefore, implies a commitment to the domain, and therefore a shared competence that distinguishes members from other people. Now to the second characteristic, the community. In pursuing their interest in their domain, members engage in joint activities and discussions, help each other, and share information. They build relationships that enable them to learn from each other. They care about their standing with each other. A website in itself is not a community of practice. Having the same job or the same title does not make for a community of practice unless members interact and learn together. And the third characteristic, the practice. A community of practice is not merely a community of interest. People who like certain kinds of movies, for instance. Members of a community of practice are practitioners. They develop a shared repertoire of resources such as experiences, stories, tools, and ways of addressing recurring problems. In short, a shared practice.
It is the combination of these 3 elements that constitutes a community of practice. And it is by developing these 3 elements in parallel that one cultivates such a community.
This e-learning video is produced and brought to you by Skills Academia.
The term
Thinking of yourself as only a member of multiple communities is quite inadequate. Membership may mean having only a passive connection or a name on a roster, or just a standing in. You may be highly involved and committed to the success of your fraternity, the senior class council, an ethnic or religiously affiliated group you are a part of, or the service organization you co-lead. Due to some hindrances, you may be connected to one community and less active in others. Some of the hindrances may be limited time preventing you from going to some of your communities, disinterest, priority shifts. Next slide, please. Being a member of a community of practice implies an engagement with others who are working towards some action. The people in that community are doing something, and you are a part of that in some meaningful way. Like being a teacher in a teaching department for, say, English, their main goal is to, teach the English type studies. Each person belongs to many communities of practice, but with varying degrees of centrality. In some communities of practice, we are only peripherally involved. In others, we are centrally involved, according to Draft and Paulus. Next slide, please. A person can lead an isolated life while surrounded by people in classes, in the snack bar, or at work, or a connected life when meaningfully involved in a community. According to Harvard sociologist Herbert Gans, Within the larger environment, there are many urban villages, which are the many small communities within larger systems. The giant lecture class can become an urban environment of small villages through the use of such class structures as discussion groups and team projects. Next slide, please. The social networks we form in these communities of practice are critical to accomplishing shared goals, as well as to our personal identification and satisfaction. A high level of people's involvement in their diverse communities characterizes the nature of American democracy. According to Robert Putnam, he focused attention on this aspect of American life when he studied the involvement of people in civic life and saw declines in indicators like labor unions, church attendance, and PTA meetings. Next slide, please. He is quoted of saying between 1980 and 1993, the total number of bowlers in America increased by 10%, while league bowling decreased by 40%. He also observed that most of the Americans were bowling alone. Most Americans have replaced socializing with neighbors with socializing with friends and colleagues from the workplace, he also stated. Next slide, please. This change from being involved in groups that work for civic outcomes to groups that promote more personal outcomes deserves a lot of attention. Putnam describes the value of social capital as by analogy with notions of physical capital and human capital like tools and training that enhance individual productivity. Social capital refers to features of social organizations such as networks, norms, and social trust that facilitates coordination and cooperation for mutual benefit. Next slide, please. Focusing on communities of practice also raises the question of how can those communities best function to fully engage community members. Let's assume that you are very committed to the community of practice that is the office of your part-time job. An office culture that includes you in decision-making, supervision that promotes your personal development, reward systems that show your work is valued, co-workers who support and trust each other, and office celebrations of work successes all create an environment that bonds people to this community. Next slide, please. Being in community requires an awareness of reciprocal processes. An individual has to decide to be part of the larger community, and the community has to involve and welcome individuals, and each individual must practice justice, not for the sake of benefits, but for opportunity and obligation. Individuals contribute to the group's belief that it is fair and reasonable for each of us to do our part in the greater whole, uphold obligations, and feel a commitment to shared purposes. Conversely, the community must practice the distributive justice of caring for all community members and ensuring that each member is included, heard, and not harmed or disadvantaged through community membership. Next slide, please. Communities sometimes may remove members who are unwilling to uphold shared community values. Take, for example, a student who continuously pulls false fire alarms may not be an appropriate member of a residence hall community. Another example would be the member of a lab team who sabotages other teams' experiments. This person would also be deemed inappropriate for the community. Ulrich, in 1998, stated that communities thrive on social reciprocity. For example, Chris will help Mary move her refrigerator and Mary repays that kindness. Not necessarily by helping Chris back, but when she helps floormate Diane put up flyers in the hall. Diane likewise pays Mary back when she picks up the trash that is spilled out of the trash can at the end of the hall. Another example of this would be going to a restaurant and tipping a waiter if they have performed their service excellently, which can result in the waiter providing excellent service to you if you would have tipped them generously. Also, a more simpler option would be babysitting for a friend, and then in the future, that friend helping you to move house. Aaron Gandhi in 1998 shares many lessons he learned as a small boy from his grandfather, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Some of these lessons, which would have led to violence, would be wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, politics without principle, and rights without responsibilities. I leave you with this in mind. Learning to feel responsible for others in our communities of practice is critical for our human connection. I now pass you on to Sayada.
Hi, pleasant good night to everyone. Thanks so much, Janelle. So, I will now be discussing the development of community. So, on the first day that you and 30 other residents move into your new residence hall floor, or 50 students come to a first class, or a committee of 12 convenes its first meeting, community does not magically happen. The development of a spirit of community must happen intentionally. So Scott Peck, 1987, has identified 4 stages of developing true authentic community. So these are pseudo-community, chaos, emptiness, and true community. Pseudo-community. The first stage is pseudo-community. In this stage, a group may feel like things are just fine, people seem to be getting along, relationships are courteous, but it is in reality a superficial, underdeveloped level of community. So for example, pseudo-community is conflict avoiding, whereas true community is conflict resolving. Next slide. Second, chaos. The second stage of community building is chaos. During this stage, there is a noisy din of different views. Different people or factions are asserting their perspectives from which to set the community's agenda or determine important processes. Committee members promote individual agendas. Cliques form on the residence hall floor. This stage can be dangerous because some give up and retreat instead of working through this stage. It is important to find meaning in the idea that even fighting is better than pretending you are not divided. Scott Peck, 1987. So this stage is similar to the storming stage of group development presented in Chapter 7. So Peck, 1987, observes that groups take one of 2 paths out of chaos: organization or emptiness. Organization leaves the source of fighting untouched by establishing structures and systems to manage and handle the differences of opinion. So for example, the residence hall floor group makes a new policy to rein in those who are misusing the floor lounge. Or a committee, frustrated with long debates, decides to vote on decisions and let the majority rule. The structures may solve the immediate problem, but the source of tension and disagreement may fester. Although it is counterintuitive to think of the term emptiness as good, emptiness is Peck's term for the process of community members emptying themselves of their barriers to true communication. Thus, emptiness becomes a stage in community building. Emptiness. This third stage is the realization that many personal feelings, assumptions, ideas, stereotypes, or motives become barriers to truly listening and understanding, and being understood. Again, emptiness refers to emptying oneself of the assumptions and preconceived notions that may block one from truly listening. So it may mean someone saying, "Wait a minute, this argument is beginning to sound like the freshmen think all the seniors are money hungry, selfish, egoistic, and the seniors think the freshmen are unrealistic idealists." We need to let go of those assumptions and look at the good thoughts each group is raising. True community. In the fourth and final stage of true authentic community, conflict still arises, but there are ways to be heard, and the community members usually know they cannot reach consensus or any level of agreement without dissensus or disagreements to create truly better decisions. Building community is creating a feel of we out of lots of I's. Many groups never get past pseudo-community and find ways to courteously interact and get their work done. That may be sufficient for their purposes, but ongoing groups that are doing difficult work would benefit from recognizing PEC's stages and working towards authentic community. Communities that engage in this developmental process and reach a stage of authentically functioning as a community, often by not recognizing that being a community is a process, not an end state. Communities are not static, they are constantly changing. New members join a group, external crises cause new levels or types of conflict, and key members who had been instrumental to nurturing community leave. Communities must recognize when they need to attend to the cycle of rebuilding a genuine community. Participants who want to be highly engaged in the work of any community need to assess the ways in which they can become effective community members. Godikkun's 1991 proposes that individual participants practice these 7 community building principles. 1. Be committed. Commitment to others is prerequisite for community to exist. 2. Be mindful. Think about what we do and say. Focus on the process, not the outcome. Be contemplative in examining your own behavior. 3. Be unconditionally accepting. Accept others as they are. Do not try to change or control them. Minimize expectations, prejudices, suspicion, and mistrust. 4. Be concerned for both yourself and others. Engage in dialogue wherever possible. Consult others on issues that affect them and be open to their ideas. Fight gracefully. 5. Be understanding. Strive to understand others as completely as possible. 6. Be ethical. Engage in behavior that is not a means to an end, but behavior that is morally right in and of itself. 7. Be peaceful. Do not be violent or deceitful. Breach value promises or be secretive. Strive for internal harmony and harmony in relations with others. Any questions so far? Is everyone okay? I assume everyone is okay, so we could proceed. Okay, so if each participant has the mental model of their organization as a community and practices community building skills, the group will be enriched. Participants will listen more keenly, respect each other even when there are disagreements on specific issues, seek resolution of differences, and learn more in the process. Etzioni 1993 challenges us to lay claims on others to be similarly involved in and dedicated to community. Modeling and practicing this kind of participation is essential to being a contributing community member. Relational leadership is directly linked with building community. Exhibit 9.1 illustrates the connections among the elements of relational leadership with the understanding of the elements of community from Gardner 1990 and the advice on community building principles from Godikkun's 1991. So this slide is Exhibit 9.1, Connecting Relational Leadership to Elements of Community. So under relational leadership, we have inclusive, which is under elements of community, wholeness, incorporating diversity, links with the outside world, be committed, be unconditionally accepting, empowering, a shared culture, group maintenance and governance, development of young people or new members, be understanding, be concerned for both yourself and others, ethical, caring, trust, and teamwork, be ethical, purposeful, participation and shared leadership tasks, process-oriented, good internal communication, be mindful, be peaceful. So I would also like to discuss college communities. For hundreds of years, college campuses have been described as communities of scholars or as learning communities. Yet, in reality, a sense of true community is not always a shared experience. Hate crimes happen on campus. Incivility can be found in Senate meetings. Some organizations devalue the purpose of other organizations, and not all people know or care about each other. The Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching, 1990, conducted a major study of what students, faculty, and staff would like to change about their campuses. So all groups agreed that they need a renewed sense of community, not a return to an older, homogeneous model, but a kaleidoscopic community that embraces differences and finds common purpose. So the foundation promoted the concept that healthy college communities would be purposeful, open, just, disciplined, caring, and celebrative. Campuses can take purposeful steps to valuing being together in community. As a microcosm of society, the entire college campus is a community and includes multiple communities. There are communities within the various positions on campus. So, for example, students, faculty, administrators, staff, alumni, etc. Within those groups are usually smaller community clusters. So, for example, seniors, the Asian Student Association, graduate students. So each cluster has unique needs and shares community issues. There are communities by departments and by the programs of functional units. So for example, the history department, the engineering college, the student activities office, the women's center. So all of these communities are bound together by the common goals of being a community of people committed to learning and to advancing their own education and the education of others. So Dawn M. Roberts was a returning adult learner at Gulf Coast Community College, majoring in social work, and she said, serving as president of the student body and also president of the Disabled Student Organization, I have had the opportunity to see both sides. Administration is concerned with cost effectiveness, being politically correct, community support, and a positive representation of the college at a community level. The student is concerned with pursuing and fulfilling the needs of fellow students, environment, community, and dealing with the issues. Working together allows results that benefit both sides. Different organizations have different purposes and focus. Higher education communities emphasize such elements such as collegiality, learning, scholarship, academic freedom, and student development. A social organization might emphasize friendship, fun, and enriching experiences. A sports team stresses competence, teamwork, and responsibility. Regardless of the special mission and focus of those groups and organizations, the people in them will experience healthy communities if they intentionally practice the discipline of community. Our smaller communities become a fractal of developing global communities. More said, identifying our common interests and broadening our relationships will be the defining elements of 21st century communities. The global community of the future will be, at best, a series of communities that are interdependent and diverse, embracing differences, releasing energy, and building cohesion. The broader global community will be enhanced by the health of the many smaller communities that constitute the whole. Those living within each community define all community, has been Goldsmith, Beckhardt, and Schubert. Committing to promote and develop community in the places you function on campus is a key way of building and supporting the larger campus community. So this is a summary of our entire chapter that we covered today. Framing any group or organization as a community of people working together for shared purposes enhances relational leadership. Thinking of that group as a community connects participants to a shared paradigm of expectations and obligations. To flourish, communities require relational leadership. Relational leadership practices value community as the context in which meaningful change can possibly occur. So this brings us to the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for staying and listening. We appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment and let us know and we'll answer it. Thanks so much.
All right, I doubt there'll probably be questions, but good presentation there, guys. We stopped the recording.